Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our Concepts Edition, episode 126. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda. And today's quote is, "Doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is an absurd one," from Voltaire.
Took me a second to unpack that when you told me earlier.
Yeah. From a book I'm listening to called The Undoing Project, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this relates to a lot of stuff. Namely, what popped into my head was, I think managing people and sort of building teams, it is tempting as a leader to pretend you know stuff, but it's actually way more powerful to remind everyone that we don't know stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like it is, I think, unpleasant to, I don't know, I don't find it unpleasant. Maybe like unknowing is kind of intriguing, I think, which is what's so cool about lean. It's just feeling like, holy shit, there's so much here. And
yeah, I mean, I think what this speaks to for a lot of folks is that I think generally people are not good at being in a condition of uncertainty, like a liminal space. Like it has a name, like, and it's known for being unpleasant.
Right.
And I think oftentimes people will just sort of decide on a condition of certainty.
Yeah.
To get themselves out of that space.
Totally.
Even though, as Voltaire is saying here, that certainty is a false existence, or it's like,
right,
there is no place of true certainty.
And like PDCA loops or PDSA is, I think, and like the scientific method is sort of the primary operating condition is in a state of doubt about the state of your hypothesis, I think.
Uh-huh.
Right. And then the second you sort of prove it one way or another, the next question is moving back into a state of doubt.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people love to say like the only constant is change and like feel good about themselves.
Right.
But like the reality of that makes most people want to like tear their eyes out. Because generally people tend to kind of thrive in situations of stability, or at least need some level of stability to move
right.
forward from.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting quote. Good one.
Good one, Voltaire.
That's a good one. Yeah. Guess that's why
nice work.
Know his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to jump into some IMTS recap?
Yeah. So we were both in Chicago.
Yeah.
Us and a few thousand other people. How many people show up to that, I wonder?
I looked at the like homepage for IMTS on the first day, happenstance. So I was trying to find the map. And I think it said like 87,000 registrants or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Fair number of people. Yeah. I think, like I was saying, I think the first year I went, I want to say it was like 180. Like
really?
Twice as many people.
No way.
But 80,000 is still plenty.
Yeah, but like more than that, I guess all the people, I mean, not more than that. Actually, the most enjoyable parts for me primarily were other people who were in attendance. And meeting people from the internet that I kind of know, or seeing old friends. But I mean, all the stuff on display it's always very cool to see. So I brought Sam, and we're not particularly in the market for anything at the moment. Like we will be, but
yeah,
I think but I just wanted him to be aware of what existed, so that as we're kind of solving problems, I feel like what he came away with, just from a few conversations we've had since getting back, was not so much like, oh, I saw this and I saw that. It was more like, there is a machine for everything. Which I think, even if you didn't see one at IMTS, now, ideally, when there's a problem, he's kind of like, I wonder what the 7 companies are who like specialize in this esoteric,
totally
tiny little piece of,
Yeah, I think similarly, I brought Will from my shop, and just as sort of an exploration, like come see what this is all about. No particular expectations for takeaways or anything, or going to find out specific things. But I think talking after, I think his big takeaway was like just the scope and scale of manufacturing and like what that, and just machining specifically, like, yeah, similar thing. I think he was like, I sort of thought, you know, there's a handful of machine tool companies, right? And no, there's a lot. Like
right, those are the only ones there. Yeah,
this is a big industry.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool to see. I think for myself, like the first year I went, I had only ever lived in my little machining bubble. And so it was like fully mind blown for sure. And these days, it's less interesting. Like,
yeah,
the demos are, yeah, I saw like,
it's like stuff we've done or talked about doing.
yeah, there wasn't a lot that I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few times, you know, seeing a big machine like take a heavy cut is like, well, that's impressive.
Yeah. Or the Makino sample parts.
Or yeah, exactly.
Those are mind blowing.
Yeah, there's definitely impressive, but
Yeah.
not like super applicable.
Yeah.
But I think what was really cool for me, helpful for me, was getting to be talking to a bunch of really smart people in this space as I was thinking through stuff, but then also just like sort of being in and around all of this stuff without being bogged down with my kind of like day-to-day problems in the shop.
Interesting.
And like think about my shop from a 30,000 foot perspective while surrounded by all of the potential avenues that could take. There was a certain sort of freedom of thought around kind of like what I'm doing, what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
That was very helpful and clarifying. And I feel like I came back with a decent strategy for how I want to invest time and money for the next 6 to 18 months, kind of.
Interesting.
And what that roadmap is going to be, and maybe specifically what I'm not going to buy right now, which I think is good.
That's very good.
Helpful.
It's rare that list grows.
Right.
Yeah.
The not buy list.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. I had one, I mean, I was there, I spent a lot of my time kind of running around doing Arda stuff, I would say.
Yeah.
But on the front of Austere, the big question for me, I mean, a lot of interesting stuff around robotics, automation, stuff like that. But which I think we should talk about a bit.
Yeah.
I think 2 years ago when I went, my question was kind of like, okay, I bought a Brother machine, but like now that I know really specifically what I'm doing, what are there better machines out there?
Yeah.
And I kind of came away with like, not really.
Yeah.
And not to say like there's examples of machines that do any one of the things much better, I would say. There's cheaper machines, there's faster machines like that produce parts faster, like an Index. And there's I don't know if there's machines that are a faster changeover time, but like maybe a pallet loaded, like a pallet pool kind of thing. But like mix all those together, like price and speed and changeover. It's just hard. Like an Index machine is like, I don't know, $1 million or whatever. And then like probably, a 4-day changeover.
Right.
Right. And so like, sure, if we were running, but the problem with $1 million just as a premise is I don't know if it would be more productive than like 6 or 8 or 7 Speedios sitting next to each other. And then when one of them crashes and goes down, you actually still have a good majority of your capacity. So even that was kind of a big, anyway, this time I did go back to the Brother booth. I was kind of like, this is probably the machine we're sticking with. I did look at some others, but nothing really caught my eye.
Yeah.
But the question was kind of like, do we just rinse and repeat the exact setup we have now? Or do we kind of move in a slightly different direction, whether that's like an R machine where we can bar feed right onto the table, or is it like an M machine where we get 5-axis, or the U500 where we, and I think where we kind of landed is that if we're after capacity, we should rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Because we know exactly how to do it. We get standardization across the machines, or very nearly anyway. And then if we want to explore new potential, we would look at a 5-axis machine.
Yeah. The capacity versus capability thing is an important distinction that I think most people forget to make. I often have forgotten to make. till you pointed out to me at one point in discussing a machine purchase. And yeah, we usually, most people, I think, when thinking about a purchase, tend to try and like combine them all into one. It's like the SUV problem, right?
In that it does nothing
well, because you're attempting to like combine capacity and capability and all these compromises,
right.
And you end up in this like weird thing. Yeah. Anyway, I interrupted you.
Oh no. So, I mean, that was kind of it. The one big downside, I think we're going to end up just rinsing and repeating for our next machine. The second I say that, of course, I'm like, well, we could get an R machine and that's basically rinse and repeat, but with the capability down the road of doing like really nice robotic loading or bar feeding, etc. But, I think the one thing I struggle with is having the machine on the shop floor is very different from just knowing you can buy it, right? Like if we had a 5-axis on our shop floor right now, I would design stuff that uses the 5-axis.
Right. Your business would transform dramatically.
Yeah. And if I don't, I'm not going to, and it's not as exciting, and it's not like I can't have it in my hand later today or like later in the month. And I get that that's sort of like a shortcoming of me or something, but it's like
design process,
something like that. Anyway, so I just kind of want to be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
But I think realistically, just with everything that's going on in my life at the moment, like if I got another S1000, or whatever the new one is,
right? W, or,
I could have, like, I know the parts list. I know we have all the programs to run. Like, it's actually not a huge lift. Like, obviously it's still work to plug all the valves together and map it in the PLC.
It'd be a matter of days though, not like weeks.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. I think that's the move.
Interesting. Yeah. The one kind of takeaway, well, there was a bunch of aspects to it, but I've been considering automation in different forms in our shop. And the question has kind of been like, do we buy a fancy 5-axis with a pallet pool and try and automate our high value work? Do we buy a way to load our M300 and open up the door for more mid-value, complex shaped work, but not our super high value, like one-off work? Or do we automate our R450 and automate our lowest value work? Right. And definitely what I came home from this trip with was, I don't think our shop has the like skills capability at this point to automate our really high value work. And I'm not actually sure to what degree that would even be possible for anyone. Like, I'm sure there are shops that do that, but like, I don't know. It's hard to comprehend being good enough at programming, knowing your machine well enough that you throw in a $400 piece of material for one part that has to be right the first time with tight tolerances and just like send
kind of what like the folks at Meta kind of tried to systemize a bit, or do you think that's not in the same
I don't think
arena?
It's quite the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing I came home with was that I don't think we're going to attempt to automate that right now.
Gotcha.
And so if we're not going to attempt to automate that, that means trying to free up people from doing other things in the shop and like create more skill in the shop to do that kind of work, which pretty much led me towards automating the R450 and not having anyone really like tending machines doing low value work.
I mean, when you say it that way, it feels like a no-brainer.
I didn't go to IMTS thinking about robots at all. So that was kind of an interesting...
Came home thinking about robots.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting switcheroo where I was like, oh, this is actually probably pretty high on the priority list. And I hadn't been putting any thought towards it.
After hearing you say that, I started sort of thinking about it again. I mean, we have a robot sitting in our shop that I need to fix. But my... kind of what I came to again, and I think we've even talked about it on this podcast, but I think it just slipped out of my head at some point, is like right now our machine runs, let's just pretend it runs 8 hours a day, which it doesn't, 5 days a week. That's like a third of the available hours per day, but then it's idle all weekend. So the maximum it's going to run And like, yeah, sometimes it runs 3 hours after we're there, and maybe even 6 hours is our longest runtime. But realistically, our uptime is not that high. And if we're looking for capacity, $150,000 essentially doubles our capacity.
Buying a machine.
Yeah. But if we bought a $40,000 robot, that could triple our capacity.
If it could feed the machine all the time.
Yeah. And its longest runtime to triple it would need to be about a 16-hour runtime, which I can think of like 5 different schemes for that.
Right.
You know, and not to say it would be easy or that we wouldn't run into a ton of problems. Like, obviously buying a second CNC has advantages.
Yeah.
Also, like, you can crash one and still be producing parts.
Yeah.
Or maintaining. Anyway, there's reasons. But when put that way, suddenly the $40,000 robot just doesn't seem that expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's true.
Which is crazy.
It is pretty wild.
Because it's also really expensive. But
yeah, it's weird how it all shifts, right? As the business changes and grows and perspectives change. And
yeah, like you're looking at a $200,000 machine and it's like, man, that's insane. And then you think about what you could produce on that machine and what that sells for. And you're like, I don't know why I'm not buying that right now. I mean, I do know, but yeah.
Right.
One thought around the robots is thinking about robots, you know, there's a lot of emphasis in Lean and Toyota about finding the cheapest possible solutions to things. And oftentimes, as we've talked about at length on this podcast, oftentimes that has to do with your non-value add, not your value add. And so it just seems a little crazy for a machine shop or for a shop as I mean, yeah, we've been at this for 3 years, but also there's so much room for improvement in our shop.
Yeah.
And in our processes generally. It just feels like automating stuff might kind of be like skipping the part where you look hard at your process and just improve operations, kind of. At the same time, then I was thinking about like the armies of robots Toyota uses. So I don't know. And I think like what you just said kind of speaks to what that is. Like it is a cheap solution.
Yeah. Well, and people are expensive.
I think that's the other piece is like, I forget what the number is, but I think they say machine, like it's like 8. I think it was
3 to 1.
Yeah.
Was a typical.
So the cost of an idle machine is 3 times less than an idle person.
Yeah. Also, if you're thinking about like value add versus non-value add, like, yes, machine tending is sort of like part of your core competency process, but putting parts in a machine is definitely in the non-value add part of the category.
Right.
So I think you're still attacking the right part of the problem.
Sure. But if you then look at the whatever hours of the week that are spent walking around the shop or whatever. Anyway, but also those are really hard to free up. And like part of, I think, our challenge right now particularly is being really constrained on man hours and solving problems is really time intensive.
Yeah.
And so there's also like, I can spend $40K and free up a good amount of time. Like that time can go into helping with the other parts of the process.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's also, and I think this is, I don't know if it's good, but I think this is why cobots are becoming popular versus industrial robots. But I think it's fine to use sort of the lowest hanging fruit, like lens sometimes.
Right.
And like, yes, maybe that's not like buying a robot, automating machine tending, maybe isn't like getting at the root of our non-value add issues in the shop, but it might be very low hanging fruit that gets us a good chunk, you know? Yeah. And I think it's fine to use that lens sometimes when you're time constrained, and not doing that is going to make it a lot longer before you're going to have the time to attack the big fundamental problem.
That is a very good point. So one other very exciting thing at Arda was, we signed a bunch of people up for Arda, so that was very cool. Thank you all for, taking a shot on us.
Being on board.
Yeah, being on board. So a couple people, I guess, mentioned Arda to Jay Pearson, and he flagged us down and ran him through the product. And he said that he hadn't realized how mature the product was. So I thought I'd mention on this podcast that it is not an idea that we are thinking about building. It is something that is built, and we have people, a bunch of businesses around the US, well, actually a few around the world, who use it every day, and it's kind of the backbone of their business. So if you are interested, please do reach out. It is a product. It works. We have tons of new ideas that we're always kind of munching on, but like the core functionality exists, and people can buy it if it's useful.
I have to say I was in the shop alone today. And I've just started like making notes on like, do we have an Arda card for this or whatever?
Yeah.
And this is probably not everyone's experience in the shop of it, but for me as the business owner, just sort of like there is a definite calm in knowing that like the stuff is just going to get taken care of and it's going to be there.
It's kind of crazy. And that's true for like paper Kanban as well. Like when I was first implementing paper Kanban, the crazy difference of having a pile of materials with nothing and a pile of materials with like a shitty index card with some very non-descriptive notes. I mean, obviously Arda cards carry a lot more info, but you're just like, ooh, I can just relax. I don't need to be tracking this anymore.
Yeah. It's pretty rad.
It's kind of, it's very cool. I had another thing on that. Stepsister tooling, kind of a joke of a term, but it does work. So sister tooling is in a CNC when you assign, obviously you know this. For anyone who doesn't know, it's when you tell a CNC machine to use one tool, and if it breaks or reaches a certain amount of cutting time, you have a second one of those tools loaded into the machine, and you tell it to make the switch, and that's called sister tooling. And so we only have a 21 tool changer in our machine, which is awesome, but not awesome enough, I guess. And so we ended up pre-building duplicate tools outside of the machine. So if something breaks or wears out, or we notice a surface finish issue, it's just a matter of switching it out and not kind of, I don't know. We were losing a lot of time, and often it's sort of like at critical times in the day.
Yeah.
Or what's the term? Non-scheduled downtime, I think, is the problem, right? You can schedule in downtime. When it's unscheduled, that's when it's a problem.
Yeah.
So basically we just have a bunch of duplicate tools on right next to the machine that are labeled to go in the tool pocket and has all the info on it on how to do it. And we only do that for the tools that tend to wear out or break more commonly. And then every time now we need another tool, we try to make a stepsister tool for it.
Yeah.
And we just have a paper tag on it where one side has a green piece of tape with some notes on it, and then the other side just has a red piece of tape. So when you pull out the other one, you put it back on the wall, but it has a red tag on it. So visually, it's very easy to tell it's not ready to go in the machine and needs to be rebuilt. Something I just realized is that is a Kanban with a minimum quantity of 1. And so we're going to put that all in Arda and then have the tool holder and tool ID. Because right now it's like, I know what it is, right?
Yeah.
We use a Mari tool, 60 millimeter, whatever, ER 11. But like, if I wasn't there, I think Sam or anyone else would kind of be like, huh.
Does the Kanban represent the whole assembly, not just the holder as its own thing to order? It's like,
yeah, it would be the whole assembly. I would just list out the parts that go into that assembly, which we've started sort of getting into with SOPs. Yeah. And building a bomb in there. But anyway, fun realization. There's a video on the Austere Instagram if anyone wants to see it. In that video, someone called out the fact that our that area is like very messy. So I cleaned that up this morning, but I guess that belongs in next episode.
Nice. I had a couple thoughts here. I guess looping back to the robot. I've started making a mental list, soon to be a real readable list, of kind of like all of the things that would need to be done prior to implementing a robot, all the accessory processes.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. Well, and what those involve and which ones we can do now before a robot.
Okay.
And like spin up and like basically have it actually be running.
That's a great call.
Mostly to do with work holding and like making it a smooth transition.
Mm-hmm.
So the basics are like getting a reliably adjustable op1 jaw set that we're happy with.
Yeah.
That's not a weird like rigmarole to make new ones every time we need.
Right.
Making an op2 soft jaw design and process that is a good envelope, like good material size envelope to do the kind of parts we want to do, have all the process, have it Kanban, all that jazz. Integrating all that stuff into our Fusion templates is another big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the main kind of tasks we have to do before we can really start thinking about actually buying a robot. Obviously there's like, building a stand and
sure,
and that kind of stuff. But in terms of like things we can approach right now and start using tomorrow, if we had them,
I mean,
those are the things.
Hearing you say that, a couple things. One, I actually was thinking about this earlier today on soft jaws specifically.
Mm-hmm.
We, a while ago, like every single piece that is involved in doing work is a critical piece. And it's funny to me how much attention gets given to the final product in my shop as well. Like, this is not me throwing shade at all. And then conversely, how little gets put into everything else, which is, I think, what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah.
Right. So like you have a print and you have a process and you have proven out code for making the part, but then often the soft jaw, which is essential, is kind of like, oh yeah, we made one, so it's done, right? It's not like, okay, so where does that code live and how, like, are there instructions for how to make another one? And obviously it's a little different for me because we make the same parts month in, month out.
Sure.
But even so, like you're saying, like, how do we make a soft jaw? What is the full process for that? Or what's anyway, so that's really been top of mind. I'm curious with work holding, are you thinking of like buying the number of vices or a bunch of vices so then it is sort of that quick change even if you're doing it manually and not with a robot? Or like or are you thinking of part loading the R450?
Part loading, yeah. Okay, so gotcha. The air vices.
Cool.
If we were just swapping out the current manual vices that we use, more like a pallet loading situation, we have everything we need.
Gotcha.
Established. Yeah.
And you're part loading because
this is a good question. Handful of things. One, we'd need a bigger robot to load those vices. Two would be we'd need a different interface on our trunnions to engage those vices than what we currently have. And we already have automatic vices that are set up on that machine.
Right.
So that was kind of my thought process.
That makes sense.
Sort of lowest cost of entry.
Also, loading the vice external to the machine is also time.
Yeah. I would like to get away from that if possible.
Yeah.
I think it's very doable.
It was very cool seeing both the lights out manufacturing setup. I thought was super cool in the flexibility. I also really liked the Hermla setup.
Yeah, the one that was on what machine was that? It was like the was it a C22?
I didn't pay attention.
Or C12. I think it might have been a C12.
And what I liked about it was its flexibility, less in the vein of like the way Lights Out Manufacturing was approaching flexibility, which was like just a good program that could accommodate a lot of stock sizes and kind of do all that stuff seamlessly. This was more that the robot could change the gripper jaws, the robot could change the vice jaws, and then some of the vice jaws they were loading essentially made it into a pallet changing machine, and then they were robot loading pallets with op2 parts. Yeah. And I just like the whole scheme. It's interesting to note that loading a part and loading a pallet is kind of the same. You need very good location.
Right.
very good rigidity, right? Like it's kind of standard interface, meaning the part you already machined looks a certain way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool.
But that's a clever thing to do ahead of time, is lay out all the things that need to happen.
Yeah. Now
so
I just
easy
have
to pull the trigger on the
actually do it.
big exciting thing, and then it gets there and you're like, oh, we have like 2 months of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I had a couple other thoughts. This is sort of tangent a little bit.
Yeah.
As our job management system evolves in the shop, as we've discussed, right? Like we initially transitioned to having everything in one place for clarity. And now we're slowly transitioning to having the information more dispersed around the shop, more at the point at which you need it. However, you still need to see the whole picture sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was just realizing that I think it's important to distinguish between needing a global view for comprehension versus needing a global view for management.
That is a great point.
And similar to sort of like the distinguishing between capacity and capability, I think companies tend to want to combine those two into one thing.
Yeah.
And it's sort of intuitive, right? If you're a manager, to be like, oh, I want to see all the things. And then you're like, oh, I can see all the things.
Let me tell you what I think about them.
I'm going to move all the things.
Right. Totally.
And that was just kind of, it was freeing for me this last week to think through. I feel like that's opening some avenues in my thought process and how we can start to view from a global perspective without attempting to have forward looking or management or anything, and just be like, okay, so when we scrum, we need a way to look at everything that's happening in the shop. Right. But that's not like we're going to go now move everything around and attempt to manage everybody's day from this view. This is just for comprehension.
Right. And in fact, hearing you say that, I think, and we've talked about it on a few occasions, but the second you start to take that global view and try to build a plan is the second you sort of veer into the world of control, command and control.
Yeah.
It's inherently. And that is like really fragile. And so 6 hours in, 2 days in, whatever the time is, that plan gets changed.
Yeah.
And in a pull system, those changes kind of just happen.
Yeah.
And in a push system, I guess the nice thing is it makes the big boss man feel really useful, right? Because it's like, I am the conductor or whatever, but like, So that's a good point. Like getting that insight so that you understand the state, but not necessarily, I need to go make a lot of changes.
And I think one thing it freed up in my mind was being able to start building out a tool for noting status of things at each station that feed back into the software without it being critical for like actually managing the status, if that makes sense. Like if it fails, it doesn't actually affect what's happening on the shop floor. The only thing it will affect is someone's comprehension in a scrum or trying to understand. And that's like a quick clarification. Like, is this actually here? Is this not actually here? Versus when all of it is super software dependent and the view goes bad or is out of date, then you have real problems. But if we're actually managing the process in location or in station as things move, and then just attempting to feedback, I think it will be pretty straightforward. And started thinking about, I haven't actually looked into the details, but if we can like have QR codes at stations where we could select a thing and just scan it, and then it would update the status of that work order to show that it's like, it's been here, basically. Not that like that is key to any other downstream processes, but like it's here. it's being worked on here.
Right.
We can see that.
That's cool.
Without it being like really burdensome.
So you're going to probably do that in software, not in hardware, where you can like glance out across the shop and sort of see that. So you're not looking for like a general state of the stations. You're looking for more specific information about where in the process a particular project is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
that
so.
makes sense.
Yeah. It'd be more like comparing to due dates,
Interesting.
looking at load potentially.
I would love to, even if it's just for feedback, I'd love to show you what we have
in Arda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Scope creep. No. Two things related. One is that sort of scope creep. So we started doing. We had a company. We have a new customer that is that has like deep customization on sort of standard workflows, which sounds unique, but then I was like, oh, that's like
everyone
to
some degree or another,
basically. And so we started building, we got, I would say 48 almost continuous hours into conceptualizing and sketching out what turned out to basically be, like Asana or anything else. And at some point I was like, Maggie, can you just like listen to this and tell us what you think? And she was like, okay, you guys aren't Asana. You're not going to be Asana. And like maybe don't do that. So anyway, we pumped the brakes on that pretty hard and then had a really big breakthrough, which is how this has gone, is like things get really, really complicated. And then eventually you're like, oh shit, there's a way to simplify that. Yeah. And the way to simplify it was basically realizing that Kanban can trigger, and this is not insightful, but here it is. Kanban is a signal to do work. Mm-hmm. And that work doesn't need to be like machine this part. That work can also be like send this email, send an invoice, call the customer, anything else. And suddenly you sort of have pull project management without increasing the complexity of the product architecture very much. And so we sort of we built that out, and I mean, the UI isn't complete, but it's an interesting, it sort of started getting me thinking about like how that actually works on the shop floor. Like how, like I think, and we talked about this with the shop board, but I think a lot of us, me included, do maybe a majority of the processes in the shop as like flow at best, but probably push. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the customer interaction stuff doesn't have to do with the load of the shop floor.
You mean pull at best, but probably push?
No, flow. I know that flow is good, but you also have to earn flow. And like flow, where the second one thing is completed, it goes on to the next step, which it's sort of push adjacent. Like even if there's true demand where someone's like, hey, I want a part, having every single station cascade instantly into the next station, whether that next station is ready or has capacity, is push. Yeah. And so you're misallocating all office admin labor, pushing things to the next station, even though they're not ready for it. Right. So like, it's just poor allocation of resources. But it's really hard to break away from. And actually this gets into like, we're not all Toyota, because like for me, if someone is interested in paying me money, I want to send them the invoice. Right. Even if I'm also saying like, hey, we don't have capacity this month, we have capacity next month, but I still want to get that going. I don't want to be like, hey, we'll invoice you in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, because they might be on to other things, or I don't know. It's just, so I don't know really where I'm going with that, but it started like thinking about how to do a lot of that managerial, a lot of the admin stuff and office work, and just like all the stuff that has to happen for a company to function, and actually converting it to pull. I don't know if we're going to, I mean, I know it's theoretically possible, right? It's all the same stuff, but I don't know how it shakes out. I
think there's a couple things. One,
Sorry about the creaky chair, by the way.
I had a note in here which ties right into this about the challenge of applying lean and high mix. And I think part of it just tends to be that the way we think, most people tend to start at the specific and move away to the broad. And in a job shop, you have to flip that because you can't start at the specific because the specific is variable.
Right. Like you can't, and we had this conversation 3 years ago, basically, but you shouldn't improve the process for making a widget if in a day you're going to be making a different widget.
Yeah. So you have to refine the broad level part of the broad aspects of the process.
Yeah.
And I think that the challenge comes in that the reason we end up doing push is because let me think this through. You end up needing to have, if you're going to do pull, you end up needing to have a lot of buffer between all of your different operations, especially like I think even more so in a high mix, right? Like in a not variable production environment, you can start to delete those buffers as you develop like really good synchronization and all this stuff.
And consistent takt time.
Yeah, consistent takt time. Yeah, non-variability of process, right? Like, and those things are really hard to achieve in high mix. So you end up building buffers, but oftentimes just the length of those buffers is probably longer than what your customer will stand for.
Right.
And also not really like representative of what the shop is capable of.
Yeah.
And so I don't have an answer here. Somewhere in the middle ground, there is a solution.
Well, yeah. I think paradoxically, what Lean is very good at is high variability. Because like one of the things Toyota talks about and everyone else talks about is like no two cars that come off the production line. Like there's like 5 billion models. SKUs. Yeah. So I think that's kind of exactly what, we should talk.
We need to dig into this more. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause like, that's exactly it, is like, how do you pull through a consistent process with deep customization that affects every step of the way, kind of. And
it's possible. I think we stopped doing pull for our material sourcing because it was taking too long, right? And so you can think about it two ways. One, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but one is start doing push, right? We have an order the material.
Right.
Right.
Before the saw is theoretically free for it.
Saw is not available. We haven't programmed the parts. Like it's not going to be on a machine.
Yep.
Or the other is figure out how we can build a buffer here, right? Bring material in-house, stock material.
Right.
That's your buffer.
Yep.
Potentially. And I think that you can like sort of tackle each part of this process. The trouble I think is doing it in a way that like doesn't just like bloat your system.
Well, I think this very much gets into like, we're not all Toyota. Don't do what Toyota does, right?
Yeah, right.
But do exactly what Toyota does in the broad sense rather than the specifics.
Yeah.
Like, to your point above, is like, if you look at the macro concept in Lean, it's continuous improvement. It has nothing to do with Kanban, any of the rest. And it's sort of right. It's like,
right. Well, yeah, we're going to use this quote a different day, but I'll just say it here. Hold on one sec while I pull it up.
Well, I was also, while you pull it up, we can also do a stop and fix if you pass me that non-creaking chair instead of this creaky chair.
Okay, the quote is from Taiichi Ohno. All we are doing is looking at the timeline from the moment a customer gives us an order to the point we collect the cash, and we're reducing that timeline in the value stream by removing non-value added wastes.
Yeah.
Taiichi Ohno. So if you mic drop, exactly. If you bring that perspective to bear, the world is your oyster and you have much work to do. But if it makes sense to do push, I think, right? Like if that shortens that lead time and isn't creating rework or other like downside.
Right. Which it will
probably,
but yeah, no, totally. And actually, so very interestingly, to me anyway, Our technical advisor wrote an article in which he kind of said like the big shift you need to apply is to treat production as a controls problem, controls being like robotics and stuff, of like feedback and
communication and
data back and what you should do to that data and feed it back out, and like waveless versus non-waveless production, etc. And I think what's interesting about that is like, if you do what Toyota does, it's a long road, and fundamentally we're not all Toyota. And nothing against long roads, but like there's some interesting stuff where you can do where you take true demand, like actual orders, and you don't expose your production line to those true orders, but you do take the data from those orders and make sure that your production line like has the capacity, right? Like Toyota also treats like just in time with their data, where they only deliver the orders to the final production line and not upstream. The back end of that is production leveling, which like you don't have, I don't have. I mean, we all sort of, I think, intuitively attempt it, but like not to the degree that they're doing it.
No.
Of like, make sure that you mix all your parts evenly throughout, not the month, not the day, but like the hour.
Yeah.
Like we're not doing that. And yes, so like you can sort of push some of the data. I don't know. There's a lot of, I guess what I'm saying is like, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room for creativity around how to solve the problems. And it's not all just like use Kanban and pull, like pure pull.
Yeah.
I've been really curious about talking to I know there's a bunch of lean cabinet shops. A bunch.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're a job shop, right? They have basically a standard set of operations that result in a cabinet, but all the like there's endless configuration of the door style and the color and the widths and every little bit. So I'm very curious how they treat that in a pull paradigm, or where they do and where they don't.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I'm excited to revisit all of this. We had a lot of personnel changeover, and in all of that we haven't had a lot of time to like kind of go over some of these basic fundamental concepts again.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of just like, well, this is how we're doing it, but not like this is why. And I think there's good potential to rethink some of this stuff. We still do pull from the shop floor to programming.
Yeah.
And we still use our job board and effectively pull as sort of like a gauge on capacity and load, but we're not doing true pull, like as in now go do that work. Right. Yeah. This station is down to 3 in the queue. Yeah. We need a 4th now. Yeah. Yeah, I thought we were going not to use up all our quotes, but we'll just use them on other episodes anyway. I thought you were going to say... a different quote? Call it
lean, call it Six Sigma, call it continuous improvement. What matters is that you get better every day. Yeah. Right? Like, yeah. And then to finish us off, because we probably should wrap up here, from the Toyota Way... I heard there's a little thing in there, free people up from firefighting and short-term problem solving to work on long-term solutions. And I feel like lately we have started to kind of struggle on that front of becoming too constrained on labor, where it starts to be like, we need to just get in here and do our work. Yeah. And it kind of sucks. Yeah. Like, it's not, I don't know. I'm becoming more and more aware of it, and it feels like taking debt from the future. Yeah. Like, cause yeah, it's just all missed opportunity. And then we're going to continue doing crappy work. And by that, I mean, like, we're putting out good product, but the process could deeply use improvements. And instead we're just like firefighting. Yeah. Anyway.
Not fun.
No, but effective. And also not exclusively. Like I think a lot of we're making good strides on the software front. But anyway, I think that's a good spot to wrap up.
Absolutely. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to everybody who came and said hi. At the meetup. Handful of listeners came and flagged me down. That was super fun. Sorry if I was distracted in the middle of another conversation.
Yeah, or didn't know who you were. The whole Instagram, not Instagram thing is like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, you're whatever handle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Now
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for saying hi. It's a pleasure. Hope to chat more in the future. You can find me on Instagram at lichen_MFG, on the web at lichenprecision.com, and the pod at incrementalci, and we have a Patreon.
Yeah, you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com. You can also find Arda at arda.cards on the internet and arda.cards on Instagram. And we'll talk to you later.